Welcome to the Jackson Rudolph Podcast. I'm your host, Jackson Rudolph, and this is episode 105. I swear, every time I do one of these episodes and the number gets higher and higher, it's harder and harder to believe. So thank you all so much for tuning in once again. Without your support, we wouldn't be able to make this show happen. We're going to very quickly, as you can see, my guest, Jason Warren, is already on the screen here, but we're going to very quickly just get through the sport karate news this week. And this was literally like a couple of things off the top of my head that I wanted to make sure we put out there at the top of the show. First and foremost, for competitive edge, which I think that Mr. Jason Warren knows a thing or two about. We'll talk about that some. Cheeks Elizondo, a traditionalist and a great point fighter. He was added to the team just several days ago at this point. So congratulations to Cheeks for joining Team Competitive Edge. We're super happy to have you, my man. And then the other big sport karate news that I saw on social media this week is what the U.S. Capitol Classics is doing for women and girls. They've partnered up with Female Fighters Matter 2. And there's a lot of key role players going on and helping make that happen. But essentially what U.S. Capitol Classics is doing is they're saying, hey, we hear the community that has been calling out about the fact that we're not getting enough women on stage, and they're doing something about that. They're also giving out some prize money to some junior competitors, which is really, really cool. So wanted to be sure that at the top of the show here, we gave a shout out to Grandmaster Dennis Brown, his wife Andrena Brown, and the U.S. Capitol Classics for doing an amazing job with that initiative. And that's going to do it for Sport Karate News this week. I intentionally made it super quick because, guys, we got a heck of a show today. Jason Warren, thank you so much for taking the time to come on the show. I think that what most people in the current sport karate scene know Jason Warren as is the coach of the Presley family and Dawson Holt. And, of course, the legendary instructor from what used to be Success Martial Arts Center SMAC is now Premier Martial Arts Lebanon. So that's the reputation that you've got for most of the people that are around today. But we're going to talk about you were a competitor back in the day as well, made a good name for yourself, especially traveling regionally as well as nationally, going to some of those larger tournaments. But before we get to any of that, I just want to give you a moment. Introduce yourself, man. Who is Jason Warren?
He's the man, the myth, the legend. So yeah, Jason Warren, this is year number 32 for me in the martial arts. So I'm originally from Memphis, Tennessee. Got my start at a studio called Taekwondo University with Grandmaster Terry Brumley. He was kind of the one that molded me into the instructor that I am, that took the time to teach me how to teach. And when it comes to like the instruction side, there's nobody can really, you can learn how to work with kids and how to motivate and inspire, which that's where he really did the most for me. But there's so many things that nobody can teach you to prepare you for some of the experiences you're going to come across. Like if a parent comes up to you and, you know, they're going through a divorce and they want you to have a conversation with their kid to just kind of help them get through it. And you're like, okay, I've never been trained for this part, but okay. You know, so it's been teaching has been a blessing for me. Now, as far as like getting my start in the martial arts, I was 9. And what did it for me was Karate Kid 3 had just come out in 1989, and I started in 1990. But that was the one thing I was hooked on. It motivated me to want to do it. I was a little nervous about doing it. I tried baseball, basketball, soccer. I quit at all of those sports. I had a fear of doing the martial arts because I didn't know, like, am I going to get a Mr. Miyagi type instructor, or am I going to get a Cobra Kai where they're like tossing their kids on their students on the ground and they're yelling at them and stuff like that. So I knew I wanted to learn, but I didn't know what the experience was going to be like. And so, went in on my first day. And it was just one of those that when I walked out of there, I did 2 intro lessons. And when I did my first one, I walked out and immediately knew that was what I was going to do. Like I walked out telling my mom I wanted to sign up. I want to teach karate one day, and that's the rest kind of just fell into place after that. But
that's awesome. So quite literally living the dream now, right?
Yeah.
And so I do want to get into your career as a competitor, because that's something that, and this is not just you. This is like I feel like all the time when I talk to young competitors today, there's so little that the average young competitor knows about those who came before them, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's like at all levels, from the legends to the key role players,
Absolutely.
and everything in between. And you are another one of those names that was around back in the day, was competing, forms, weapons, fighting. You did a little bit of everything. So let's go all the way back to the beginning of that. How did you get into tournaments? Was that something that your school did a lot of naturally? Did you find it on your own? How did that get started?
So we were not really a competitive school. We were a very good school, a good traditional Taekwondo school, and competition was not something that was really pushed upon us. But when I was a white belt, I'd only been training for about a month. I only knew half of my white belt kata, Chunji, by the way. But I only knew about half of it. We had a tournament coming up that was in town that my instructors were telling us about. And we didn't have very many students go to that particular tournament. But me and one of the other friends of mine that started on the same day, we had become good buddies. And we decided we were going to go do it together. I was scared to death to do it. I wound up going against all yellow belts. I lost that. But I had fun doing it. And it was something that it sparked a competitiveness in me that I didn't really know I ever had, because the regular competitive sports did not do a thing for me. And I was terrible at them. And I had a fear of failure, but I wanted to make a go of it. And, so it was one of those, it took a lot to get me to go. But that kind of goes back to the Karate Kid thing that I was saying is, when I'd seen the tournament in Karate Kid and there's just one platform surrounded by a stadium of people, that was what my 9-year-old mind was telling me it was going to be like. And I thought I was going to be in this ring, because our instructor kept saying, you're going to be in the middle of a ring. Then I kept thinking a ring is like a boxing ring, or it's going to be like this big platform like they were on, surrounded by lots of people. So I was scared to death of that, because I was not one to get in front of people. And when I got there and I see all these different rings and realizing, okay, so not all the attention is going to be on Jason Warren. It's the only people watching me or my family and anybody in my division. So it kind of helped relieve that pressure, because it was just kind of a fear of the unknown. And then after that, I didn't, it took me a long time to ever place. I was in martial arts for about a year before I finally even got any kind of award. And it was a sparring. I was a green belt. We had an outdoor tournament in Memphis. We used to have several outdoor events, which was kind of cool. We did several of those in my tenure before I got a black belt. But, the outdoor tournaments were a lot of fun. But I remember sparring in, it was a sport karate event. It wasn't a huge event, but I took a bronze medal. And, I didn't win my first place till I was a red belt. So at that point, I'd already been training for about 2.5, 3 years before I took my first place. And those are some of the only trophies I still have left were my first ones. And because those had a lot of meaning to me, or to it. So I had taken a first in forms and taken a first in fighting, at that event. And then as far as like sport karate and how sport karate came about, because most of these were pretty much, for the most part, I guess you would say, Taekwondo events. We didn't do a whole lot of sport karate. I didn't know what NASCA was at the time, or any of the regional circuits. So my first NASCA tournament came up in as far as the NASCA, it was a AAA rated tournament at the time. AAA was the top rated, but it was the 97 Battle of Atlanta. And that was the experience that, man, I did not know that level of competition existed. I thought I was at the top of my game. I was doing AAU Taekwondo events. I was in Atlanta, Georgia for a qualifier for the Junior Olympic Games for AAU. I had a student that I was training for competition that I sent to the Battle of Atlanta. And when I got done doing my qualifier that I won, I went over to go see him. And when I went into this tournament, I only got there in time for the night show. But the level of competition that I saw, amazed me. I had no desire in my martial art life to ever learn how to flip or do anything like that, because it was girly to me. It was like gymnasts do that stuff. But when I walked in there, I saw Anthony Atkins, Jimmy Pham, Richard Brandon, and I saw some of these names, and I knew who these people were because I read books about them, and I used to read the Karate Illustrated magazine. I was like you, I used to just study that stuff. And so I knew who people were before I ever saw them. But when I saw these names of people that I've read about, these guys were like heroic figures to me. And I was like, Terry Creamer, I read about that guy, So it's like, I was just blown away. And when I saw how tricking was, it was still in its infancy, really. And I saw how that stuff was incorporated. Like, my mind was blown. I did not know that stuff like that existed. And that started, me wanting to learn how to trick and increase my fighting level. Because when you're competing with Taekwondo fighters, you're not used to somebody blitzing you from across the ring, And so that was the other thing I had to, to kind of get past. Kind of leading up to that, I had started doing NASCAR regional events that were, we had several around Memphis, and there was the Battle of Memphis and Masters Nationals and stuff like that. There were AA rated events that were still good size events. And, back then you had the RSKC, and RSKC was like a mini NASCAR, you had NASCAR competitors. Casey Marks would come in and compete. Anthony Atkins would show up and compete. Brian Ruth and all these names. And so, I kind of got a little bit of a start into that, probably around 94 and 95, to at least knowing what sport karate is, but nothing on the level of Battle of Atlanta till 97. And that was unreal.
And I always love RSKC getting a shout out because that's where I started. I did my first sport karate tournaments were on the RSKC circuit. I guess I don't know who has been the president of that league and everything, but I guess ever since I was involved in it, it was Marty Eubanks, right?
Hey, Ken Eubanks and Jim Landtrip were the starters of RSKC. So Lori Stanley's dad and Ken Eubanks, they were the starters of that. Eventually it became just Ken. Jim stepped away from it. He got more wrapped up, I believe, in Waco. But Ken kept the RSKC going. But if anybody that did not ever experience RSKC back in the day, like, it was NASCAR just on a smaller level, but the competitors were just as good. And a lot of top tier NASCAR talent were in the RSKC region. That's where Dottie White was from. And, all the Olympic karate guys were all, killers on the fighting circuit, So there was you got to give Ken a shout out because, he was the promoter of Bluegrass Nationals, which so many in sport karate that were around back then would tell you Bluegrass was the best event, And so, it goes down as one of my favorites, for sure. And yeah, Marty's kept RSKC going, and Marty's one of my favorite fighters too, by the way.
And so now let's get into that. You've name dropped a little bit already, and we're going to talk about some of the people who were your best competitors and who you looked up to. Before we get there, though, give me a little bit more about Jason Warren, the competitor, right? Because I already mentioned that you did a little bit of everything. Even you mentioned that tricking came in a little bit later. Yeah. But when you were able to get to those NASCAR tournaments, what were you most known for, right? I've seen you fight, and then I've seen some of the old footage of you doing commas. What if somebody came to a tournament and saw Jason Warren, what would they probably recognize you for most back then?
I was more known for my kicks, jumping ability, speed. Kicking has always kind of been my forte. It's what I enjoyed the most, and of course that comes from a Taekwondo background. You're generally going to be a good kicker. I competitively, Junior Olympic Games were some of my big wins. The Taekwondo Nationals. If nobody's been to AAU Taekwondo events, they're massive. Me and Jeff Doss were just having a conversation on this the other day, but about a week ago. Those tournaments back then were bringing about 2,000, if not more. The divisions were stacked. The biggest division I had in the Taekwondo Nationals was 42. I took a gold medal at that event. Winning that was actually harder than winning the Junior Olympic Games. Because they had the Olympic style fighting, point fighting, and forms. And I even gave it a go at Olympic style. That was rough. A lot of people knock on Olympic fighting. You know what? I've seen Olympic fighters come over, and when you're fighting by point rules and the point fighters walk through these guys, go fight their rules. Go fight with them and go and see what they go through. Because, man, I've never in like a point fight have I ever like walked out of a point fight where it's like I just got slaughtered in that. I got slaughtered in Olympic style, but I didn't have the training methods and everything that those guys go through. It's rigorous training, but props to the Olympic fighters. You know what? They deserve a shout. So, you know, that I got my run in that, won my the Junior Olympic Games 2 or 3 years. This was back in like 97 when I really got my go at AAU. Did that through about 2000. I was kind of still hitting a little bit of NASCA. Of course, I was still doing RSKC and all that. So I was kind of dabbling in both, trying to find my niche because I knew Taekwondo was going to be in the Olympics in 2000. That kind of started kind of pushing me in that route because I was dominating with forms and point fighting. And then when I got in there and realized, like, actually in 2000, the only thing that's going to be in it is Olympic fighting. So it's kind of like, all right, the one thing I don't even have anybody locally to help me with, you know, I didn't even have anybody in town that I could go cross train with. So then I kind of like diverted to sport karate. It was like, okay, I'm just going to tackle the sport karate. And I had a lot of dreams and goals that I never finished and fulfilled. And I feel like I kind of, as a coach, I feel like I've lived so much of that life through my students, like the Presleys and Dawson, because money was the biggest thing for me. I eventually had to hit a point where realistically, it's going to be hard for me to fulfill what I need to do because you do got to have the finances to go do this, you know. I didn't have sponsorship. It was me from my school competing by myself. I didn't really have competition coaches. You know, my Taekwondo instructors were fantastic instructors that taught me and gave me the technique and everything that I had. My basics were good, but as far as like how to get that next edge in competition, I didn't have anybody. So when I would go to competitions, I would set up private lessons with a Daniel Sterling, or an Anthony Atkins. I've worked with several of them. I would go to training camps. My first one being in Rhode Island. I went to one up there, and I had Nate Andrade. I had Jotty Tension, the Casey Marks, Matt Emig when he was younger. But I learned so much from those guys. The next year, I went to one in Sacramento with Anthony Atkins and Raymond Daniels and Casey Marks again, and Rudy, Matt was there. And, then I went to one in Boston held by Reggie Perry, and so I dabbled in everything. I fought, I did weapons, I worked on tricking, I worked on trad, I worked just anything I wanted to absorb as much of that as I can. And I would save up whatever money I could, which was normally about $2,000 to go to these things. And you just kind of check mark what you want to focus on. Well, I want to focus on all of it. So I'd spend several hours working on whatever I could. And when I would come back to the studio, first thing I would do is teach it to my competition team, especially my junior black belts. And it's like, as I'm learning it so I can help remember it, let me teach it to these kids right here because they'll help remember it too. When I start forgetting something, they're learning alongside with me. So when I first started really getting into the competitive type weapons, I did do some Okinawan Kabuto back in the day. That's right. Like that was in early 90s. So I did get some start with the real thick bows and tompas and size, all that stuff. But when I started getting into the competition weapons and stuff, I took, like, Reed was just like a 7-year-old green belt, and I'd start working with him on all of that stuff too. He was on my competition team. I made him start learning with the real traditional bows, though. He was working with the solid oak bow, and I did that with a lot of my guys for a long time. They started with the heavy bows, but yeah, so most of my real sport karate stuff started coming around 2000, when I really started getting into it. However, I started working on tricking and stuff back in the late 90s. Like after the Battle of Atlanta, I started coming back and working on tricks, but like then the tricks back then, everybody be yawning now when they see some of the things we were doing back then, but because they're so much more advanced now.
And one thing, just hearing that whole timeline that I love so much is that at every step of the way, you were doing it for the right reasons. You know what I mean? Like you fell in love with the sport. You did everything you could, despite, how expensive it is to do what it is that we do. You were finding a way to make it happen. You were going and getting the training wherever you could get it, which, by the way, is something that needs to happen more often. Today, we don't get as many of those mega camps that have like 5, 6 of the top world champions right now.
Yeah.
We get that maybe once or twice a year with a competitive edge camp here and a Paul Mitchell camp there.
Right.
That's something that definitely needs to come back and be more prevalent. And then this also gets to something that I talk about a lot on the show, which is how the fact that in order to be a great sport karate competitor, to have the opportunity to become a great sport karate competitor, you have to be very blessed financially to just have the opportunity to get your name out there, right?
Yeah.
And so as we grow and develop this sport, if there can become more separation of the professional and the amateur, to where the professionals that have the sponsorship, that have the money coming from the tournaments, they're the ones that do traveling. And then competitors on the regional level, you can rise to become the best amateur in the Southeast or the best amateur in the Northeast, and then get an opportunity to have that big break and go to one of those professional events.
Yeah.
Redesigning that structure to make it easier for people to realize their dreams in this sport. Yeah. And when you build out the structure to that extent, because the number one complaint is like, well, wait a minute, if we do that, then the big professional tournaments don't get the money from the people coming to register. Then it's like, no. You would have those same entities promoting the smaller events, and those are your money makers. And then the money from the big events comes from spectators, not from other competitors, right?
Right.
I know we're getting off on a tangent there, but I see you nodding your head. Any additional thoughts on that before we move on?
No, I mean, everybody knows in this sport, in order for you really to succeed, you're going to have to hit a bunch of these events. And that's even the same with regional events too. You know, if you're wanting to be seeded, you better get to as many of these events as you can. We struggle financially growing up, you know, just the extra money to go into competition. Like, I wasn't making a lot of money as far as just teaching. I guess I was doing good considering for my age and stuff at the time. But, you know, just to go to one of those camps, like, I saved up till I could finally afford one of those things, you know. And I was getting my start into bigger sport karate events a little later in my martial art career, you know. And so, you know, it's kind of like I'm really getting truly involved at like 19, 20, 21 years old, you know, which is kind of late to get into it. But now I would do good. Like, if we had 30 people in the division, I was probably coming in 5th, you know, and I was coming in 5th, like under the top NASCA seeds, you know. But I already knew, like, if I go into this and I'm not seeded, I already know I'm probably going to go first, or I'm going to go somewhere kind of in the middle. You know, everybody's played that game. You know, we've all been there, you know, and, you know, that it was tough, but it's still, I enjoyed the level of competition that I had to go against, you know, and regionally too. And it took me a while to get where I needed to be, even on the regional level. Because like I said, RSKC was not a joke, you know, like there was serious competitors in there. And man, I could name drop a whole bunch that came out of that, you know, and people that I had to kind of get through, you know, to get where I was, you know. But I was happy to get where I was in NASCA events, being that I could only go to about 3. And the ones I would generally go to were Battle, US Open, and Bluegrass, you know. I was proud to say, like 2000, I went to US Open. You know, I did all the events. I did the breaking. That's where I met Chip Townsend. And Chip, that was, I believe, Chip can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that was Chip's first year too. And we both did the breaking. I felt like we both connected at that event. He came across as a psychopath on the destruction of those boards at Brick. And, you know, and he placed high, but we kind of got shut out by other big names in the breaking. But he was still, if I remember, like, I took 7th. I beat out people like Kim Do and some other people that were doing some crazy stuff in there. But Chip, I think, took like 3rd or 4th. But I did make the ESPN show, so I was kind of, you know, stoked about that, you know. But yeah, I don't know, man. It's just been a fun ride, all of it. Like RSKC, before I stopped competing, I was Triple Crown in that, you know. So if people that don't know, you don't hear that term Triple Crown anymore, but you know, I was winning forms, fighting, and weapons, and, you know, a little bit of all of that. So,
for sure. And so I want to give you that opportunity to name drop because we keep teasing it. And like, so you mentioned like obviously competing in a breaking division against Chip Townsend, Kim Doe. And by the way, I've talked to Mike McCoy and Mike Sawyer about this because people like Forms and Weapons and Fighters where we go to sport karate events all over the country and we hardly ever see breaking. And then at the U.S. Open, we watch the ESPN show. And we're like, we were competing for 3 hours and they're putting the breaking on TV again. Yeah. The breaking kills it on the ratings. Like the average Joe sitting at home watching martial arts absolutely loves breaking. And so it will always be a big part of the U.S. Open because the viewers on TV absolutely love that stuff. And I know we're going to talk about breaking more for you. However, let's get to, because again, we've been getting at it, but now I just want to give you that opportunity. Say those names, man. Who were some of those top guys that you were competing against in the prime of your career when you were able to get to those NASCA events?
You talking about the people in NASCA or regionally or what?
In NASCA. So who were those like top guys in NASCA when you were like right there in fifth and you were trying to come up and beat those seeds? Who were those guys that you were competing with and looking up
to? So I had to go against, there was Thomas Wright. If any of the fighters that have been around a while, or at least know their history, Thomas Wright was a regional competitor / NASCA world level competitor. Like he was on a team called Team Trade Winds. I know back in the day. I don't think they had a long run in NASCA, but they were a good team while they were around. He wound up fighting with CJB when CJB was a team. And I believe he was on Team Elite. So he was on, he was a big name, but he was a junior fighter. I don't know how long he went into adults. He stopped for a while, came back in the early 2000s, I think around 2003 or 4, fought for a little while, so I had Thomas Wright. Gene Peck was another regional / national level competitor. There was John Boyd at the time. Don't want to say the names, but I competed against EJ Greer. EJ was one that most people on this on the NASCA world level, if you know your history, you know EJ. EJ was kind of almost like just a slight smaller version of Kevin Thompson. EJ was a great fighter. He was a Forms Weapons guy. And I know on the regional level, I always went against him in grands, and I could not shut him out in grands, and he was a hard one to beat. Joey Perry. And if you don't know, if those that have never gotten to see Joey in action, Joey was no joke. Joey could trick, he could fight. His forms, he was a comma guy. Joey could throw down. His tricking was better than my tricking, and we had some great fights. He generally, his timing with hands was better than mine. I was the kicker, so I was always trying to land kicks. We go back and forth, and he's like, man, you used to kick my head. And I was like, yeah, but you used to drill me with your blitz. Like, or you would, step back and fade out and then step back in and drill me with that reverse punch, But, man, I'm trying to think of some others, but that I competed in on a regional level that Jeff Doss, I feel like, I don't remember, but I think we did in traditional. I believe we did compete against each other, but those were some of mine that I remember going against in NASCA.
That's awesome. And I love giving you the opportunity to shout those out because these are names that we need to be talking about more often, right? It's like I said earlier in the show, the young competitors of today, they should know all of these names, right? Like young fighters should know about those fighters from the previous generation. Same thing for Forms and Weapons competitors. And that's one thing that I've noticed is that oftentimes the people who become great competitors in this sport are often fans of the sport, right? They live sport karate, and it's not just they train to go compete, but if they're sitting around with nothing to do, they're looking up YouTube videos of old fights or old forms and stuff like that. So again, I appreciate you being able to list off some of those names because these are names that need to circulate more consistently.
Right.
And now we're going to segue, shifting from your career as a competitor to your career as an instructor. You alluded to it a little bit already, but really tell us about that decision that, hey, I want to teach. This is what I want to do.
Yeah, that decision really came as a child. It really came from the first day I walked out that door I knew this was what I wanted to do as a career. I had other things that like interested me. Archaeology was something that like one day I was like, I want to be an archaeologist or I want to be a veterinarian, till I learned that they have to put animals to sleep. And then I scratched that idea. But I knew, like, I felt like at the time, like, oh, I could do all of that. I could run a school. Like, I could.
Hey, I'm going to give you a shout out right there. Went to culinary school too, right? And you're guys, if anybody tuning in's never had a Jason Warren cheesecake, you haven't lived until you've eaten one of this guy's cheesecakes. But anyway, I'll let you go into as much detail on that as you want to. But that was just another one of your side quests.
Yeah. But owning a school was something that I want to do. My instructor, like I said, they did wonders for me. My mom, was a single mom and trying to raise 2 kids. And, I know it was tough for her, trying to do all of that. And we didn't have, for her to pay for the lessons and everything was tough. That was a struggle for her. But I know that my instructors that I had made parenting a much easier load on my mother because they were a heavy influence on me. They, if my mom had issues with me, she would pick up the phone, rotary dial, by the way, for those that know what that is. But she would start saying, let me call Mr. Brumley on the phone. I'm going to get him. And that was all she had to say. She never had to call him, but she threatened that so many times that it was, I didn't want to disappoint him and I didn't want to do 500 push-ups. So, but I know what Grandmaster Brumley did for me and the other instructors, Derry Burton, Mark Metz, and Alan Huell, Brad Whitlow, like they're all people that had a huge influence on me and my training. And, it was one of those I wanted to return the favor. And what better job to have when you got a job where everybody's bowing and saying yes, sir, to you all day. So, no, but on a serious note, it's a rewarding job, and for a while I was working 2 jobs. I was working in a trucking company with Ronnie Presley. And, that went on for about 15 years and it was wearing on me, because that was my main job. And I was teaching during the evening, but it eventually was getting so stressful. It was making it where I didn't even want to be at the school at night. Cause I was just, it was constant from about 4 a.m. to about, 10 o'clock at night. And it was just wearing down on me. And when it starts affecting the job that I love, it was time to go away from the other job. So that's when I had to kind of make a go and say, you know what, if this is going to be my career, things are going to have to change, and I wanted to be able to teach full time, which is how we wound up, ultimately in the end going with Premier. It helped set me up, for, they've helped me a lot with marketing, which is my downfall, because it's not that I was bad at marketing, but things that I did when I was running schools in Memphis was so outdated now. We didn't have social media marketing. We didn't have Google ads and we didn't have things like that. So I didn't know when I stopped my day job that, I didn't know that stuff didn't work. We were still trying to run draw boxes and that didn't work, and it was like things that were killing it for us. And, the early 2000s were not working nowadays. So we had to readjust, and Premier has done great with helping me build my school and get it to the numbers where I can make an honest living. I'm not one of those karate guys that just want to teach on the side, as our school grows, it's hard to maintain the quality that you want to keep it, because my teaching methods don't change, but as you have more people, it's harder to keep the quality that you want to keep in it. But I also want to make a living at this, and, I don't want to work 2 jobs, and teach just a small group of people, Props to the guys that want to do that, but that's not what I want to do.
Right. And that's something I love about what Premier is doing. And I got to tip my cap to Barry Vanover and then the guys at headquarters, which now includes Reed and Cole Presley, right? For what they're doing with this franchise program and all of the training that they're giving school owners and really helping anybody involved in their system to do exactly what you just said and be a successful, not just martial arts instructor, but martial arts business owner. I think that that's absolutely huge.
Sure.
And naturally, as we bring up the Presley family, I know that you guys go way back. I've heard the stories. Jake said that you were training him from the time he came out of the womb, right? The story you training that family in their basement. So tell us about the origin story of your relationship with the Presley family.
Okay. It really starts with Reed. Reed, in 2001, I was teaching for a guy named Derry Burton, and I taught probably close to half the classes. And I had a competition team that I had started around the end of 2000. And again, that was all during the times when I was still trying to learn the weapons and get better with tricking and stuff like that. So he was a yellow belt when Mr. Ronnie reached out to me about putting him on my competition team. I will say, when Reed was younger, he was very quiet, very shy. He's definitely not the guy that gets on the Battle of Atlanta stage, and now next thing you know, he takes over the show. But he was very quiet, and he was very mellow, and you never would have thought you would have had a future world champion on your hands. I had kids that were way more explosive than him at the time that did not ever get to the level that he was at, you know. But one thing I can say with Reed is he was probably ultimately the most coachable person I think I've ever trained. When he was a green belt, he was 7, and Ronnie came to me and hit me up back when AOL.com had instant messaging, and I'd be sitting there playing solitaire at night, and all of a sudden, bloop, here comes a message on the corner of the screen, and it's from Ronnie Presley, and he starts, just chatting with me, striking up conversations, and he starts reaching out to me about wanting Reed to do privates. Now, at the time, I wasn't charging for private lessons for my team. Like, if they just want a lesson, just tell me you want one, and I'll put one together for you. I wasn't doing it for the money or anything like that. So I had some people that were doing it in the evenings with me, and he was like, Reed's homeschooled, so I can have him up there during the day. And his granddad, those of y'all that know Nene and G-Daddy, G-Daddy would sit there and bring him up, and we would do it on a Wednesday. And then, within 3 or 4 lessons, I realized, like, this kid, he had a long way to go. But this kid will do whatever I say, and he will make it better. Every single time he comes back, he's fixed what I gave him. Or if it wasn't fixed, it was improved. And it actually was me coming to Ronnie, and I said, after about a month, I was like, is there any way you could get him up there 2 times a week? That I want to see what I could do with him, twice a week. So we started out coming up, I think, then we switched to like Tuesday and Thursday. Then I eventually approached him, was like, can you get him here 3 times a week? And next thing you know, we're doing 4 to 5 times a week while we're living in Memphis. And, everything I was doing, he's absorbing it like a sponge. And I started working on developing his kicks. That's where I started realizing I had a gift with, developing good kickers. Like, I was a kicker, but I didn't have a training method to teach people how to do Jeff Doss style kicks and stick it up there and stuff like that, and all the multiple kicks. Well, I started doing a lot of things with Reed, and I started coming up with the methods of how to teach those things. And, by the time he was, I'll go back in the regional circuit, RSKC, Reed was, he was like 7th, 8th place competitor at the time. By the end of the year, that was in 2003, I had him already in the top 3, and then by 2004, he was the top competitor in the division. He was already an advanced belt by that point. 2005, oh, by the way, even 2004, he was winning Battle of Atlanta. He was winning Diamond Nationals. We started putting him on the
2004 Diamonds runoff again. That was the Corey Lutkins.
That was 2005.
Right?
2005.
2005.
Yep. Yeah, I almost tied with Corey Lutkins. So we were stoked with that one. But 2005 was his big breakthrough, because he got his black belt at the end of 2004. 2005, we started running. We were competing just kind of as an individual. We weren't representing a team or anything like that at the time. But in NASCA, even coming off of Triple Crown winner for RSKC, he was winning underbelt divisions and the big NASCA tournaments. When you come in to the black belt division, you're back to being a nobody again. And at the time, Cole Eckert was one of the top, competitors of the category. We didn't know who he was. Sage Northcutt was one of the top fighters at the time. And Reed walked in, he's 7th, 8th place competitor again. It's like starting all over. By the end of the year, he was back in the top 3, and he was battling with Cole and even Tyler Weaver. Tyler Weaver was not even a big name at the time. Tyler Weaver was still trying to get his foothold at the time. And Austin Crane was, kind of the next division up. He was like the kid breaking through at the moment. Everybody was like, talk about Austin Crane. And, but then by the end of that year, he went to Mr. Sharkey's winter camp. And he had already done boot camp that year, too, in the summertime. But by that time, he was put on AKA. And Sharkey was a big influence on Reed, and like he has with a lot of competitors, and then one long after that, Reed got sick, and Reed was sick. He couldn't even go to his first tournament to represent AKA. He came down with a horrible case of strep. The strep morphed into some kind of illness that doctors never really could pinpoint. He was sick for over 3 years. He had no energy. It was almost like he had a horrible runaway case of mono, but it wasn't mono. But he had tried so many different medications and everything from homeopathic doctors to regular medicine. By the end of everything they did, they had shot his immune system, and he just couldn't do anything. He couldn't work out with me or anything. So he had just started really making a name for himself, especially coming off of that win at Diamonds when he went against Corey and the runoffs. And so it's just kind of a crush for all of us because it was my first student to ever break through. And, so it was real depressing. And for a long time, Ronnie and I didn't believe. We felt like he was faking it. We felt like he was just trying to get out of training for the day. And for about 3 or 4 months, like we were, we just didn't believe him. And Becca was like wearing us out. Like, you guys are crazy. He is sick, and it wasn't long after that we realized he really was truly sick. And like, we felt so guilty. We felt so horrible, for just, it was just us just grinding him thinking, just don't want to try, but we were wrong, and he was truly sick. And he started coming back around 2009. Maybe even 2008, but I think it was 2009. He popped up at Bluegrass. It was one of the last years Bluegrass was around. But he is like starting over at that again. Cole Eckert was back to being dominant again. Tyler Weaver at that point had just now exploded. He was the new face. And, Reed was usually ahead of him when they were, younger. But now Tyler was like a beast now, and so we had to come back and start over again, back into, being a place lower every time. About 2010, he was back to square one. Now, if you want, back to where he was. Now, if you want to ask about like the double bow, because while we're talking about Reed, it's hard to talk about Reed and not talk about double bow because we worked when he 2016. For those that don't know, Reed was a dominant fighter too. He was ranked number 1 in NASCA. Fighting with people like Sage. He beat Sage on one occasion. Sage usually won those matches, but he did beat Sage at Battle of Atlanta one year, and it was a good fight. Cole was fighting his brother, and so, he had, after having a good run in formed fighting and weapons, he tore his Achilles tendon when he was performing with Sideswipe over in Doha, Qatar, and he was out for about another year. So that's when Double Bow was born, and it was born by accident. He and I, Cole, Jake at the time, we were all just up there at the studio playing around, and Reed had 2 bows in his hand. He was just messing around, and he did something crazy. We don't even remember what he did, but all of us were like, what? That was crazy. Do that. Let's do that. Even Reed was like, I don't even know what I just did, but it got us thinking like, double bow. We need to come out with double bow. And so we started playing around with it, and we didn't want to ever come out with it until it was like perfect. We didn't want something like just to throw some moves together just so we could say we're the first ones to do it. But we sat there and messed with it, and it was a good year, almost a good year before he ever broke out with it in a tournament. And Cole was a mastermind behind a lot of that too. But I can't put it all on Cole because Reed was coming up with a lot of that stuff too. But Cole was a innovator of every single weapon you touch. But yeah, Reed made that weapon what it was. And when he broke through with that, it was the sickest. And his first performance out, he did an individual division, but he also came out with Jacob Pinto, and Jacob was doing double sword, and Reed was doing double bow. And that was like one of the most epic team syncs. Both of them were on Team AKA at the time, and so it was cool. But yeah, Reed made it what it was. But I cannot tell you, Reed was known for his forms and weapons, but people got to realize Reed's fighting was superb. He was dominating underbelt divisions, and or not underbelt divisions, but the junior divisions right before he entered adult. And we finally were at a point where, all right, Reed, you can't do it all. You got people that are doing it all, like oh my goodness, the Black Mamba. Just drew a blank on it. Yes. I mean, he's doing it all, and you had people that were doing it all. Austin Crane for a while was doing it all. And it was very hard because it's very stressful when you're fighting and the grands is going on at the same time and they're having to wait on you to fight. So it was putting stress on him at the event. He would just get in there, just almost give up a fight just because he had to hurry and be on stage. So we finally were at that point, and it's like, look, you want to be a fighter, you want to be a forms weapons guy, and that was a hard decision. And his decision came because there was more prize money to be won in forms of weapons. If I can get up there and win 3 divisions and walk away with $3,000, or I can go over here and I can win 0.5, I may walk away with $1,000. There was just more opportunities for him with forms of weapons, and that kind of also helped pursue like commercials and a little bit of the acting and stuff. So.
Absolutely. And what a great overview of Reed's career. And that's exactly why we got to get Reed back on this show. Yeah. We had him in a show earlier we did a film study episode where he and I talked about a bunch of footage, but we got to get him on there to tell that story because that truly, like the hills and valleys of like the rise and then getting sick and then recovering and then the Achilles, it's such a compelling story. And then somebody who played a big role in that story, as you mentioned, as Reed was developing double bow, and I've heard Reed in every interview he's ever given give props to Cole for
absolutely
what he did in contributing to the process of the creation of double bow. Yeah. But let's move on from Reed because yes, Cole did contribute to double bow, but there was so much more about Cole that made Cole special. So now tell us about Cole Presley.
Cole came up. He started right about the time, just a few months after Reed. Cole was 3, Reed was 5 when they first started. And, Cole was good. Cole, for his age, was great. He was, you could tell the kid was coordinated as all get out. But Cole was a late bloomer. Like it took Cole a long time being in the shadow of his brother. It took him a long time to figure out what he really wanted. He played baseball. He would do a few tournaments, a little local events and stuff like that. And he would always do good. But he didn't have the drive and the desire that his big brother had. And I would say Cole really, really started popping about 2011. He had gotten his black belt not long before. We were doing privates. He started taking more of an interest in doing privates. I'd do privates with Cole when I'd work with Reed, but I did more with Reed at the time. Reed was just more serious about what he wanted to do. Cole would come in a couple of times a week, and it was something that none of us wanted to ever just force it or push it on Cole. We wanted it to be something he wanted to do. He was a great student. When it came to being in the class, Cole was great. He was a good one. But competitively, he really started popping after he got his black belt. It's like all of a sudden something snapped and he started getting serious. I was trying to teach him bow for a long time. He was good with the bow, but he wasn't great with the bow. One day, I decided to put commas in his hand, and I started showing him with commas. And I was like, all this time, I have been putting the bow in his hand, trying to make him a bow competitor because my strength was teaching bow, even though I was a comma competitor. I was better at teaching the bow. And so I just kind of pushed that on him for a long time. And one day I decided to show him some comma stuff, and I was like, Lord have mercy, I messed up. Like, Chuck's the same thing. I showed him a little bit with Chuck's, which is the thing I know the least amount about. But I did show him some stuff with Chuck's, and he looks such a natural with these smaller weapons because those are weapons that you got to be a little bit more coordinated with. He wasn't a powerhouse like Jake and like Reed, but he was more about finesse and just good, solid technique. And he's so fluid with everything that he does. And when I just remember sitting here thinking, oh my God, I can't believe I did this. But Cole was a kicker. Cole was one of my best. Let me rephrase. Reed was a great kicker too, because Reed could stick that kick straight up and down. Cole can take that leg could. I don't know. Cole's still got beautiful kicks, by the way. But and he had some hip problems that put him out for about 6 months, which killed it. I'm not gonna say it killed. It hurt his ability to ever kick where he once was. But Cole could take that leg and not just kick straight up and down, but he could go beyond 180. Cole's kicks were insane. And that's where Cole was most known for his kicks at the time. We would sit there and teach him comet tricks, and we would do all these fancy comet tricks and then have him kick it and then do it pop, 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 bang, and then stick it at the last second. And yeah, it was crazy. But then when he was probably about 14, I'd say, maybe about 14, he started coming up with things on his own. And he, like, a lot of times when kids start coming up with it, you probably see it too when you're teaching lessons, but when kids start trying to come up with ideas, and sometimes you're looking at it and going, you're deep down, you're thinking, oh, that's corny. No way. No, that's not going to work. But you're trying not to say it like that, but like, all right, I mean, I like what you're thinking, but let's do this. Yeah, you put your spin. But there were times he would come up with something like, I really like that. I like that a lot. Let's put that in there. And little by little, he was coming up with stuff and tricks and stuff that, man, he was one of my best when it came to creating his own routines. And for a long time, I created Jakes and I created reads. And I did with Cole for a while. Cole was quick to eventually become his own form builder for a long time, and if people that don't know, man, you think you've seen what Cole's about by watching a YouTube video of what he did in a tournament. Cole had so many tricks in his bag that never were put into a form. That now they're high risk. Cole has enough tricks to put in a bag that I've told him before, dude, you need to sell them. You need to say, pay me this money and I will teach you this trick right here. Because if you're not going to use it, put it in, give it to somebody else that can use it and sell those things. I mean, because they were crazy, crazy, crazy tricks that, and then other competitors would start mimicking and trying to, duplicate things that Cole did, I will put, I always have to say when it comes to innovation, Kalman and Matt were two of the most innovative competitors of all time. I have to throw Cole in that. Those are big names to follow. But if you have not trained with Cole, Cole can go right up there with him, because I remember watching Cole pick up tonfas. Now, who can make tonfas look flashy? Cole was taking tonfas and never done tonfas in his life. He's sitting there doing all these crazy tricks with tonfas and collie sticks and things like that. And I'm like, dude, go do the tonfas. Go do that. Nobody's done it. Nobody's done that. And I still want to hurt him for not ever doing that, because nobody had done tonfas. And then about 2 years later, Cody Sanders comes out and does a tonfa for him, and he's doing crazy tricks with it. And it's like, Cole, somebody else just did tonfas. Shame on you, But Cole is crazy. Yeah, I got to give props to Cole. Underrated competitor, but he was a genius, and I can't take all the credit for all the Presley success, because Cole was a big part of a lot of that. When it came to the, helping put things together, Cole was great.
And that's, beautifully said. And I support you on all that, because I was the guy who was in the ring with him for his entire career. When Cole decided he wanted to compete in 2011, we're the same age. So from the time that he started traveling NASCA all the way through, both of us have now moved on to other endeavors, it was us, right? And so, people always, because Reed and I was the perfect, yin and yang of the single bow versus double bow and who's right. And so that's what I feel like most people remember. But the person who I had to train for, that I knew no matter what, I was going to get that matchup every Friday night, was Cole. Yeah. And I knew because of that bag of tricks that he had, that if I didn't come ready, I wasn't going to make it to the runoff, because Cole was going to slip by me, right? You were as tough as the runoffs to the grands. People saw me and Reed, but it was because I was training to handle Cole in the divisions, right? Yeah. So Cole absolutely deserves all that credit. Yeah. You had exploded when Reed was out sick. We didn't even know who you were, And then when Reed started getting back into it is when we ended up meeting you, and we met you. I'd seen you compete in California. We had gone to the California tournament that year. He was trying to get back into it a little bit, and that's when we were on the bus, the shuttle bus, to go back to our car at the Nashville airport. Realized you just lived a couple hours away, And it's like, dude, we could hook up and have you guys work out together. And that's kind of cool how that whole thing came about. But y'all were on that shuttle bus. I remember
like, where are you guys from? You're like, I'd seen you compete. And y'all were on the airplane all the way back. You were on the shuttle bus. And like, wait, do y'all live in Nashville? Yeah. So, yeah.
Cool. All right. So we made it halfway through the Presley family. We got Cole. It's Jake's turn. Tell us about Jake.
He was a freak of nature. Jake was not Jake was probably the earliest bloomer with this, because when I say I was teaching him when he started walking, literally when he started walking, I would hold mitts. I was living with the Presleys for 4 years. For people that don't know that, we moved to St. Louis in 2004, the same year I stopped competing. We moved to St. Louis, and we were there from 2004 to 2008. And so I'd be working with Reed and Cole and some of the neighborhood kids down in the basement at the Presley's house. And, Jake, I would already start working with him just kind of on the side, when he just in the living room, just holding pads, teach him how to high block, teach him little things like that. And then little by little, like, we would be down there working out, and Reed had a little broken chrome bow down in the basement, and Jake would pick up that bow. I know we were talking about this the other day. And he literally would start mimicking what Reed was doing. And at the time, Cole was not really competing much. Cole was still just working out and trying to figure out what he wanted to do. But Jake was always trying to mimic. And like, when I say mimicking, it wasn't just like a cute little, he's just kind of tall, trying to, like, he literally was doing things that were like, dang, that's actually good. It's really good. Like, it wasn't like his hand posture might be wrong, but he's 3. And he's, already figuring some stuff out that I hadn't even taught him yet. And so when he was literally 3, Ronnie wanted me to make him work out with the group. And I said, I'm not going to make him work out. If he wants to come down there and work out, he can come down there and work out. Jake would come down there, and he would stick around we worked out for an hour with the group. Jake would stick around for about 10 minutes, and then he'd want to run back upstairs and go play. But when he's like, I'm going back upstairs, he'd say it in his little voice. He never had a lot of baby talk, by the way. If you think Jake ever played with little boy toys, no, he did not. He whatever his big brothers did, he did. He was playing with big kid toys. He was playing, he skipped like the whole baby talk phase. And but he would go running back upstairs, and then a few minutes later, he may come back down. And Ronnie was always like, make him stay. He needs to learn. I was like, no. If I make him stay down there, he's going to grow to hate it. I want him to do it when he wants to do it. And then little by little, next thing you know, he's staying for 30 minutes of the class instead of 10, or 15. And then next thing you know, he's stick around for the full hour. And then I would sit there and teach him the white belt form. And you talk about solid stances. You talk about having the mean face. And like, you're trying to teach kids how to generate, how to show expression, because it shows your overall attitude in a routine, is by that facial expression, shows your effort and everything. And Jake was a natural at that. I didn't have to teach him that. It just came to him. And we started immediately putting him in the tournament. UKA was the name of the tournament circuit up in the Midwest region in Missouri and Iowa and places like that, and stacked divisions. And Jake was like, he wasn't the little kid just kind of flinging arms and legs out there. The kid was out there with solid stances and snap on the move and loud kiops. And, Jake was another animal, and he was a powerhouse. If you want to see something cool, go Google Jake Presley, and look up like the year 2008, and see him when he was like 5 and 6, and he was like a green belt, and tell me you don't see a natural born monster when he's doing that. Like, he was crazy. So Jake was on another level, and I got to say, with all the Presley kids, even Avery, all of them can fight. Because that was one of my teaching methods. I know you were eventually going to hit on this, but, they nobody got to learn CMX until it was open at the time. But nobody got to learn that stuff until you could run a good traditional form and you could fight. And all of them can fight. And I'm not saying they're just decent. They're really good fighters. They just are not. They did not compete on a national level with that. I wanted them to. But it was just kind of like all the divisions that they were running. It was just, it's hard to squeeze that in. Cole did for a little bit, and Jake did for a little bit, but they're really good fighters, So people would be shocked if they saw the level that they can go.
Well, and I like how they all have like their story about it, right? Because like Reed beating Sage Northcutt at Battle, Cole has a story when we get Cole on the podcast that he'll tell about beating Raymond Daniels Jr. in a fight when Cole was wearing like a white traditional uniform and cut off pants.
He was wearing a form.
That would have been an epic moment, right? And then Jake just said on this podcast last week that he wants to get out there and fight in an NASCAR.
Yeah.
So you mentioned Avery can fight too. Avery's the only Presley we haven't covered yet. Yeah. Tell us about Avery.
So Avery got her start about as early as Jake, for the most part. And I would say Avery is a lot like Cole, and both are extremely hard-headed and stubborn. And but when it comes to like fluidity and just finesse of the form, she's got that. And Reed and Jake were so much alike in their movements and their strength and stuff like that. So Avery and Cole were not known necessarily for just their levels of power, so to say, but just being very clean in what they do. And Avery was it was funny because she was your typical sassy, girly girl. You can't picture her being in a sport that's kind of still, in a sense, male dominated, even though we all know some females that can run circles around some guys. And if you want to see that, watch Avery fight. She hates to fight. Watch Avery fight. She is one of the girls that the boys at my studio hate to fight. Some of my best boy fighters hate to fight with her, but it's not something that she just loves to do. But I would love to see her fight on a NASCAR level, because I do think she would do really good. And they all know my views on, I love my guys to fight, but Avery has really kind of gotten into her own recently, to where she's starting to create a lot of things. And I can't give myself all the props on her without throwing out shouts to Lauren Kearney, who's been a big influence on her, as she has with you, and she has to all of our guys. But she's probably played a little bit of a bigger role with Avery more than any of them. But even Jake, to an extent, she's been a big influence on them. But Avery is tough as nails, and I feel like I would say this year, maybe even some of last year, I feel like Avery has finally reached reached her peak. I'm not going to say she's not going to get any better. Not to mean that by any means. But you know how when you watch somebody that you've been training for a while, and it's finally all of a sudden the physical aspect finally catches up to them. They now know how to generate that snap and that power and that killer drive. And for a long time, I felt like that was her struggle. Is she didn't have that killer instinct that her brothers had for a long time, and I feel like she's finally got that. And it took a while for Cole to hit that. Like Jake came out of the womb explosive, and Reed, it took a little while to get it, but Reed hit it earlier, and it took a little longer for Reed and Cole and Avery to hit that. Jacob Bessie was one of my other ones. It was kind of the same way that it took him a little later to finally grow into what he needed to be intensity wise and power and all that stuff, So Avery's awesome. And I think she's finally starting to see it's paying off now, So she's done a great job.
For sure. And I love how you bring up Jacob Bessie, because he's another one of those successful competitors on the NASCAR circuit that you've trained. And this is what Jake and I were talking about on the show last week is there's not many instructors, not a coach, not somebody who helps somebody out after they've reached a certain level, but instructors, senseis, sometimes whatever, that have brought people from white belt all the way up to a Team Paul Mitchell caliber competitor. The only other name that could come to mind, Jenny Amato commented last week, Sensei Sharkey. Yeah. Able to do that, bringing up people from white belt. And then I'm sure there's fighters that have done it. Obviously, Coach Plowden's done it with his kids.
Hey, Ken Eubanks was another.
Yes,
if you don't know Olympic karate, Ken Eubanks and Marty, they had a nest and they all were local. I mean, just from the same roof. Then they could go out there and battle with Paul Mitchell member. I mean, they were, Boston Taekwondo was another.
Exactly. I was about to say Boston Taekwondo and their
Tony Young.
But here, what Jake and I were talking about last week was that Dawson in particular proves that it's not genetic, right? Dawson's the one who is like, no. If you look at the people who have come out of SMAC, by the way, people don't forget, I tested for my 4th degree black belt at SMAC Lebanon under this guy, right?
I thought you did your 3rd too.
Was it? It was third and fourth. You're exactly right. Yeah, it was third and fourth. Absolutely. But anyway, so now let's transition and talk a bit about Dawson Holt, also added to Paul Mitchell this year, same time Avery was added. So now talk about Dawson, not a member of the Presley family, but definitely one of your greatest prodigies, right?
Mm-hmm. Dawson he started, I believe, in 2011, maybe 2011, 2012. And already a very gifted kid, like just a natural, but a kid that was extremely, extremely hard on himself. And Dawson, to me, had a low self-esteem. He lived in the shadow of Jake. Jake at the time Jake may have had just gotten a black belt around that time. But they were always around close to the same age. And Dawson was one of those that's easily influenced by people around him. He immediately would latch on to people that he looks up to. If they've got something that he wants, then he would go out of his way to try to do what he sees from the people that he looks up to. Everything from just myself to doing everything that the Presley brothers were doing. There were, Ross Levine was one that he liked a lot, growing up, because Dawson was a good fighter too. And, Dawson is a success story in its own. And I kind of separate him from the Presleys because from the instructor side of me, I spent so much time trying to teach this kid that he's more than what he gives himself credit for, because he would go into RSKC events, Pro-Am at the time, with Marty's circuit, but he would go into a division, and if he didn't win, he was just down on himself. And he wasn't the kid that's just going to go start bawling and crying, but it just was written all over him that he just felt like he was this little. And but he would put on just a killer performance, and we've all been there as instructors, and I can't explain, Dawson, why your score was as low. I watched it as an instructor, and a lot of times there'd be times he's not winning when I know as a coach he should have been in that top three, and I generally as a coach can say, okay, but these kids that won this, they were doing this and this and this and this, and there were times I could walk out there going, I don't know what they saw in those kids, Dawson, but all I can tell you, here's what you need to do to get better, though. This is still something you need to do for yourself, and let's not worry about those guys. And Dawson's challenge was, we teach our kids how to set goals, and Dawson would set the highest goal instead of small-term goals to lead to the big goal. And if he wasn't reaching that big goal at the time, then it was I just don't feel like I'm ever going to be that good. And there were many nights I'd drive him home just, so we could have a talk about setting goals and setting realistic goals. Don't set something so far out that, should not even be on your radar right now. But, he would set his goal I want to win first place. And my goal, at the next tournament is to be in the runoffs to and so we would try to teach him how to set a goal and say, look, you're taking 8th, 9th place, set your goal to be in the top 5. Let's go with the top 5, because if you walk out of there in the top 5, then you're going to be proud of yourself. Quit looking at number 1. That's our long-term goal. And so the biggest challenge was teaching him how to overcome him. And I do think that growing up, he lived in the shadow of Jake. As he got more competitive, he wanted to be, in that spot, winning those. And he literally said to me one day, I don't think I'm ever going to be able to beat Jake. And at the time I don't even think he was competing against Jake at the time. But I kept saying, Dawson, if anybody can do it, you have the talent to do it, But I said, you got to get out of your own way. And Dawson was another beautiful kicker. Could kick straight up and down. So eventually I would say the year COVID hit, Dawson was kind of hitting his breakthrough, and COVID kind of squashed that, because he had I believe it was Compete Nationals. He made it on stage for his first time. It was kind of just if you get on stage for the first time, that's really all you need. And then after that, it's the ball's rolling now, And, from there, once COVID and people were having tournaments again, Dawson was back on his game. He was dominating regionally, but it really, 2020 was really kind of the start of his breakthrough. But last year was definitely by far his most dominant year. And you saw what he did in US Open last year. I mean, it was insane, the number of wins. And also, that one win that was given to him that went to Mason, that was supposed to go to Mason. The way Dawson took care of that was not something his parents had to say, you need to go back and you need to do this, or you need to say this. Dawson did that on his own. Dawson, is he's a humble competitor, and all the Presleys, everybody's been a very, very humble. But the way he did it was so graceful, and he still walked out of there. Even after that, he still walked out of there with a ton of wins that tournament, Yeah. So I'm glad. I think he's finally at that point where he sees, that I was right in what I told him all these years.
That's awesome. Well, such beautiful tributes to all of those competitors. And I know that we can go on and on about each of them and then even more competitors beyond that. But I know that we're also already running pretty late on this show. So I'm going to wrap up. I know we had a lot of other points that we wanted to talk about, but hey, maybe we can get you back on the show another time. At some point, and I'm going to go ahead and hold all the Presleys and everybody accountable for this. At some point, it'd be cool, maybe at one of the milestone shows when we hit episode 150 or something, maybe try to get you and the whole Presley family in on a show and do a little panel discussion. But I digress. So to put a bow on this episode, you're somebody, we've talked about your breadth of experience as a competitor, regional circuits, NASCA, training world champions. You've literally been involved in every step of the way. Also a promoter, shout out Music City Smackdown. We're going to get them a little bit better shout out right before we head out of here. But given all of your experience, when you look at sport karate as a whole today,
sure,
fighting, forms and weapons, you're qualified to talk about all of it. What is one thing that you feel like we're doing really well and you want to see sport karate as a community continue? And where do you think is the biggest area that we can improve?
So I would say the biggest thing that I can't talk about the progress of sport karate without throwing ProMac in there, because ProMac totally went off the rails. And there was a lot of hands that were in that. Your dad was one of those, and myself and the Ruths and Ronnie, we all put that together at our studio and signed agreements on what our goals were. We had already been talking about things we didn't like about sport karate and things that we felt like needed to improve. And then we brought on Holly and Joey the next year, which, props to them as they're running the circuit now. Our goal was to certify officials and take them through training, and nothing is perfect. We still have things that we still, are trying to grow on. But one of the first things was to try and certify officials, make officials look like officials and act like officials, and not come in there and have the guy that's wearing flip-flops and a cap backwards, and you walk in and can't even tell an official from a competitor or a spectator, or it was like a chaotic event, great talent, but it was chaotic, and so we wanted something that was more professional. And, so we decided to tackle that. And I will say it, this is a line that Joey Perry says a lot, we can all complain about the sport, but what are you doing to improve it? You're not improving it by just saying, okay, I'm going to show up and I'm a coach or I'm a competitor. You're the one that is sitting back and barking the whole time, but what are you doing to help improve the sport? So that's how ProMac was pretty much started. And that's still the direction that we've tried to go the whole time, is what can we do to improve the sport? And are we, let's be part of the solution to it. And when ProMac was born, NASCA saw that. And I'm not saying NASCA's biting off of it, but I definitely think they have taken notice and seen it. They love to have ProMac officials there. So I think that was a really good thing for sport karate in general, was the emergence of ProMac. And there's been other leagues that have been trying to start up that are kind of doing similar things. So I think it's a start. And if I say things that I would like to see better, is still you got to keep working the officials. You still got to keep making officials better. I would lie if I ever said that there's not bias in judging, and not a lot of times when a competitor barks and says that person's, screwed me and, yada, yada, we always look at, well, just quit worrying about that. But on the instructor side, because all of my guys, and you dealt with it, everybody's dealt with it. You were not the top competitor all the time at one point, and neither were my guys. they were in the shuffle like everybody else was in the shuffle. And we had to pay our dues like the saying goes. You have to pay your dues. But we did that. We did all of that. But how many times can you look at a panel of officials and say, I already know I'm screwed. I already know where that where their score is going to go. You can, you and Reed and Cole can all look at a panel and say, that guy's got me. This one's got Jackson. This one's going to go Cole. We already knew that. And you, as a competitor, you should not be able to look at a panel and know where your score is going to go. So there is that. And I do think there's a subconscious bias sometimes. I'm not going to say all the time, but I do think it's human nature. When all right, I've got these 20 competitors, all right, and I've got these top competitors over here that we see on a regular basis. And how many times have we seen it where you have a solid group of lower class competitors? I shouldn't say lower class. That sounds awful. But people that are not known, that just show up at a tournament. You've never seen them before. But, oh, my gosh, did you just see that routine this guy just did? I don't know who this kid is. Who is this? Who is this kid's coach? But then that kid doesn't even come near the top group, but they're easily in that level, I've seen that a lot. And I feel like that there's things that we could do to help minimize that, because I do think for the most part, your top seeds generally are your best competitors. That's how they got there. They went through that same thing that we all complain about. But there's times that I do feel like, as an official, you're looking and I already know these guys right here are solid. I already know because I've seen them, but I don't know this kid right here. And so you don't know what to expect, I think there's things that we can do better. And I would say, I love the ideas. We've talked about it before. And it's something I'm looking at and implementing, possibly by Middle Tennessee, if not SmackDown, but have a trial category, a trial division that the judges will be judging on certain criteria. You can't judge. This judge right here cannot judge on this person's tricking ability. You can only judge on stances and intensity. This judge, you can only judge on creativity. This one, you can only do that. And then, you scale them on a scale of 1 to 10, and you just add up your scores. But, you got judges that will get wrapped up in the wow factor and go, man, that stuff was crazy what I just saw. The basics may not have been the best, but my gosh, the tricking ability is off the chain. Well, you can't judge on that tricking ability right there. That's what this guy's here is going to be judging on. You are judging the basics right there, and that hopefully that could help, a little bit. But my goal is to have a trial division and have some competitors and no charging for that division. But I want and do it with black belts only. But I'm going to put these black belts over here. We're going to have several of y'all, and we're going to give the judges scorecards, and it's going to have it all broken out. And you judge them like that and just get feedback from those competitors and see how that goes. Because this is something we're trying. If it will help eliminate some bias, then by all means, it's a good thing.
I think that's the biggest thing to remember in our sport is it doesn't hurt to try. Like, I feel like so often people have ideas and they get shot down in social media discussion boards because everybody's like, no, this won't work and this won't work and this isn't fair for this reason. It's like, wait a minute. It's not going to hurt anybody to try. Right. If there's enough people that think this is a good idea, why don't we try it? And I'll give my 2 cents on it briefly, because I feel like another part of the problem is with the exact scenario that you described of that competitor who the judges, nobody's ever seen before, they show up and they're at the level of a NASCA seed, but they don't even place in the top 4. What explains that? I think a big part of that is the amount of access that the parents and the coaches have to the judges, because when a judge comes to a karate tournament, they're volunteering their time. They're not doing it for the free lunch because it's a cold sandwich and a bag of chips, right? Yes. And so when a judge comes to a tournament and sits down to judge, the only thing that judge has to worry about is if a mom or dad or coach comes up to me after the division and asks me what I saw, I better have an answer. Absolutely. So judges know, hey, if they're one of the last 4, nobody's probably going to get mad if those 4 are in that top position. Right. And so it's comfortable. It's safe, right? And I don't think that there should be complete separation of coaches, right, from the judges, because I also believe in accountability. And there are judges that, because of the bias you mentioned, if you don't have that accountability, then bias starts to run rampant. And so I think a big part of it also is the judge compensation, right? Is because if you start giving the judges more incentives, then they have more of an incentive themselves to do a professional job.
Yes.
Right? And not worry about what, little Tommy's mom is going to say, but focus on making the right decision.
Right.
Because that's what they're being compensated to do, whatever that compensation may be.
Amen. Well, and with that said, if I had a button that I could push to change sport karate, and it would, sport karate is its own culture from other organizations like WKF and AAU and things like that, where I will give props to AAU, and you didn't have the same bias, with scoring. And again, this is not a blanket thing that says all officials are biased, because that's not. All right, but there is some, and we know it exists, and we would be blind to say it doesn't exist. Worry about just making your competitors better. Well, we do that. I do that as a coach, and I'm not one to tell my instructor, I think you got screwed on that one. I'd never utter those words out of my mouth. I may say, I don't know what the judges were looking for that they did not see with you, but here's what we can do to change. However, if you go into an AAU, because the Taekwondo Nationals and Junior Olympics were run the same way, competitors went to a staging area, and you stayed in staging area until your division was called. Competitors parents and even coaches had to stay with their competitors. Coaches didn't just have free access to go everywhere because they had a coach's pass. So parents were up in stands. They were not allowed anywhere near that floor, and they couldn't get to it. So even they better crawl over a fence and jump down, to get down into that area, because you didn't have access. So there was no mingling between competitors and officials and hanging out with people. You didn't get a chance to even know those officials on a personal level, or scorekeepers or anything like that. These scorekeepers were not tied into a kid in the ring or anything like that. So competitors stay in the staging area, and the officials are dressed all in suits and ties, looking like officials. They're all in the ring, and then you have a person in the back that when it's time for your division, they walk your division out. Adults, kids, doesn't matter. They walk you out. You sit down and you start your division. They were running things on screens back then, and that was in the 90s, and they were already had it all up on screens. They were more advanced than we were in sport karate. So, you come up and you do your thing, and then as soon as your division's done, you're not walking up to the judges and talking to them. You're going right back into staging. If you're got anything else to do, if you're not competing in anything else, then you can leave. But there was never that interaction. So I like what you say, and I make notes, because if a competitor comes to me and says, what did you not see with me? What did you not like about my routine? I have a note for every single kid that goes in that division. Yep. Because I'm not going to give, how many times have you seen it where you go up and you ask a judge that made no notes, well, what could I have done better? Oh, you just need to keep working. You just need to keep practicing, or you just need to work on your stances, and you go back and you watch the video and go, well, stances were great, So that was just a blanket answer to get you out of my face, If you ask me, I want to give you a legit answer of what I truly saw. You may disagree with my call and not agree that I should have placed you higher, but, you may agree one way on a competitor, and I'm agree on another. If we see witness a car wreck, what you saw and what I saw may be two totally different things. It's totally subjective. Things that are more important to me are going to not necessarily important to this person here. And so I love the uniformity of an AAU event. Culturally, I don't think sport karate people would ever go for it. They like to have that free reign access. Everybody crowd around the ring. I want to be up close and personal, if we want our sport to ever, we all hear people say, we don't think sport karate should be in the Olympics. I would love to see sport karate in the Olympics. Our competitors are on that level. They are on that level, but we got to have an event that if the Olympic Committee were going to come look at an event, a sport karate event, it doesn't need to look like a circus when they walk into it. It needs to be uniform. You don't need to have a coach over here cussing out an official because they disagree with a call, or a competitor that's disrespected. You wouldn't have seen that in AAU. You would have been DQ'd. There's no warning. You're done. Get out of here. And if your coach opens their mouth in a negative way, your competitor's already DQ'd. It is not, we're going to give you a chance. Okay. Don't do that again, or we're taking a point. We're putting it over here. No, you do that once, it's over. So you didn't have that. And coaches, you paid a fee to protest a call. So you paid, and it wasn't a big fee. It was like $40, $50 you paid to the board. They'll look at your case. If you're wrong, you lose your money. If you wind up being right, you get your money back. But nobody wanted to pay that money because nobody wanted to possibly lose out on that money, But it is a way to stop a lot of the nonsense that doesn't need to be in our sport. I'm not saying that, we don't need to listen to people, but, so many people's calls are subjective. If you're a coach and you disagree with my call, well, you're looking at your competitor in a different way than I'm looking at your competitor. That's your kid. So I get why you look at them this way. I'm a coach. I'm an official. Yes, I'm volunteering my time, and I'm watching all these. I have no tie to these kids right here, So I don't have that bite, but we do know it exists, and it does set a different view. If you walk out after a tournament and you see this official that was in your ring eating dinner with a competitor in your ring, that is going to have a negative view. You can't say it's biased if they give that kid a higher score, but it's still something that our sport has dealt with for a long time. And I don't have a solution unless we went to the way AAU does it, where you don't even have access to those officials, so can't get down there with them. That's my take.
So many great ideas, so much great stuff. We definitely got to have you back to keep these conversations going. Everybody tuning in the comments down below, this is the exact type of discussion that we want to have. Positive discussion about things that sport karate can do better. Not a list of grievances about everything you don't like, not all the things that went wrong at the last tournament, but where can we improve and what things do you like? We call it sustains and improves, right? What are the sustains? What are the things that we need more of that will help us do more of the good and less of the bad? And having that positive discussion is so vital to maintaining this community and helping it continue to grow. Last thing, Jason, before I let you go here, because I know we've run way over at this point, but you got to give him a shout out. Music City Smackdown. Tell us all about it.
So our tournament's been around, I believe, 11 years. I think this was our 11th one we just had back in June. And it went by a different name back in the past. It was just, I forget why we even named it. And then one day we decided on the Music City Smackdown, and because Smack was our school name at the time, and we just like the Music City theme, and your parents have been very instrumental in that event. I can't give shouts about our tournament. We do run a very good tournament, and we've been blessed with that. But Eric has been behind the scenes at every single one of those from the start, just about. And people don't give enough credit to what Eric does with all of our events. And especially Ronnie and Eric in NASCA doing so much for NASCA. They represent ProMac within the NASCA tournaments, but Eric has done so much for our tournament and treated it like it was his own, and so shout out to your dad. Your mom's even been very instrumental in that. She's helped us out with ideas. Kathy's very creative with everything. And when we sat around and we thought about the gold record and platinum records, that idea came over a dinner table one day on the way to a tournament. We sat down and we're trying to come up with something else. We were doing championship belts. We've done mountain bikes. We've done, the big trophies, and we've done all that stuff, and trying to make our events separate and different than somebody else. And, we were going the championship belt route for a long time, and people loved that. And then all of a sudden there was starting to be a surge of other tournaments doing it. I'm not saying they're biting off of us, but when other people were doing that, we wanted to, all right, let's quit doing that. Other people were starting to do that. So then we went with the records, the LED, records, and that was a hit. And then we started seeing an increase in LED awards. So we're like, okay, now it's like, we want to be separate. We don't want to be like somebody else. And so, we sat down and we're trying to come up with something different. And we decided either like a gold microphone or, doing like gold and platinum records, something that keeps the Music City theme. So, but we've been happy, and we've been blessed with like really good officials. The ProMac judges come in, and this year the mics came and helped us out a lot. And just we've never been in a position where we're hurting for judges, and thank goodness, because that's always our biggest fear, is not having enough officials. Like, I could handle less competitors, because the officials is what runs that event. And if you don't have enough officials, you still have the black eye, and so that's what I have for SmackDown. But I'd love for everybody to come and be a part of that. We do it in Lebanon, Tennessee, which is Nashville, basically. But the same with Middle Tennessee Classic, which is our event and Eric's. And that one's coming up in October. So we run that the exact same way, So I do want to say, while I have you, and we do got to get back sometime, because I would love to talk history with you, because I like my history like you like sport karate history. But I want to say one more thing on the rules. If I could change something, musical routines. This is a huge pet peeve of mine. I don't like judging musical divisions for the sake that the rule states it must be choreographed to the music. I would love to see the idea come right back to, there is this amount of points taken off if it is not choreographed. And we're not talking about choreographing your walk-in. We're talking about choreographing the routine. That is what the rule states in both ProMac and NASCA. I want to see that rule enforced. And if I were the one solo judge that says, you know what, I'm going to take off for it, and decide I'm going to be that first guy to break that mold, people would hate me as a judge and protest me out of there. But I think it forces the creativity of the competitor. It puts something back on them, because as an official, I don't want to look at the same routine 3 times in creative, musical, and extreme, and I think it now is going to push people. If you don't want to do that, then fine, don't sign up for musical, go over here and do creative, go do extreme, but I think it puts something back into their court and say, here's what you got to do. Go back and put this together, And
I love the fact it'll make the forms look different, because the reason, and I've talked about this on the show before, the reason that nobody choreographs their routines is because when you start choreographing to specific beats or specific sound effects or lyrics or whatever it is that you're choreographing to, the pace of your form becomes too slow for the modern speed of any extreme, weapons form. I said, of course, the bow form, right? Or an open form, right? And so if you enforce the choreography as part of the judging criteria, well, then all of a sudden it doesn't matter that the other forms that are just using background music are faster.
Yes.
Speed isn't what matters in this division much. It's the choreography that matters more, and it's dependent upon the way that it is enforced by the judges, because as long as judges allow competitors to use their music as background music, I'm guilty of it. I played background music and did it.
Yeah, all my guys have done it too.
Competitors will always do what wins. And so
absolutely, 100%.
What happens, you have to change what wins, which comes down to 2 things and 2 things only: rules and judges.
Yeah, if we said right now, 2023, starting now, because this gives you time to make adjustments to it, it does make it harder, because competitors now got to train totally different for that routine. But I know it's easier on a competitor. If I've got 3 categories, I just do the same one in all 3. As an official, I can tell you, for me personally, if I'm judging you and you got 3, divisions you're doing, and you change it up, and I'm not talking about put a different trick in this one and take something out of this one, it's still pretty much the same form. I love to see variety and creativity and originality from a competitor. Like our sport is a trendy sport. If you look at the layout of an extreme form or creative form, it's the same layout between competitor. They all do the same thing. We start with a backside 9, spin hook kick, go into an aerial or go into a B twist, and then we take the corner. We do our tumble pass. Man, be different and separate yourself from the group. That's where I give props to Jacob Ellis. Nobody was like him. He didn't always place the highest because he wasn't with the trend, but he totally was unlike anybody else, So, but yeah, I just want to throw that out there, when it comes to musical divisions, and then somehow separate yourself from the rest of your group.
I love it. What an awesome message. What an incredible show. Thank you to everybody tuning in here tonight. And of course, thank you to Black Belt Magazine for hosting the Jackson Rudolph Podcast. We'll be back again. Maybe not next week, because I'm going to Martial Arts Super Show this week, but hey, maybe we'll get an exciting guest live from the Martial Arts Super Show to do an episode of the podcast. I got to get on the phone and try to figure some of that out. But anyway, once again, thank you guys all so much for your support. Huge thank you again to Mr. Jason Warren. This has been an incredible show. As I always say, if you're just tuning in live here at the end, as soon as I end this thing, you go back, you rewind it, you watch it on your way to work in the morning. I don't care. Just make sure you hear this because there was some sport karate gold being talked about tonight. So once again, thank you guys all for the support. This has been episode 105 of the Jackson Rudolph Podcast. I'm your host, Jackson Rudolph, and I'll see you next time.
Appreciate it.